Hey guys, welcome to this video. Thank you so much for tuning in, sharing in this now moment with myself and with one another. If you haven't seen these videos before, welcome back. If you have, my intention is unity and oneness. I wanted to do a little week in review and also talk about a really cool question that someone asked me earlier, and it took me into a flow that was very unexpected. And I'm still processing, integrating, and making sense of it. So in this particular week in review, I just want to invite everybody to take a moment, check in. How do you feel? Take a deep breath, drop into the heart. And, I could go into so many different directions. One of the questions I've been asked recently is, what does it mean to drop into the heart? What does it mean to get out of your head? So I could do a whole video just on that. But in a very simplistic term or a simplistic answer, it just means get into your body. It means feel what you're feeling. Am I feeling something right now? Am I breathing? Okay, yeah, I'm breathing. That it's in itself just takes you out of whatever was happening a second ago and brings you into a bigger state of awareness of how you're feeling. So that would be the simplest way. And the second answer to getting into the heart just means feeling gratitude. So those are my two simplest answers to those questions, but I do want to do a video that goes into more depth on that as well, and I will eventually. And maybe I'll offer that on my website, which I am in the process of updating. So get into the heart, ask ourselves how we're feeling, come into a place of gratitude, and just get out of our heads for just as often as we can throughout the day. So that was one of the things I found this week I struggled with a bit. I really got into my head a couple times of overthinking, overanalyzing. And at one point, I had a lot of frustration come up. And I'll just give a very short version of this. The frustration began for me while I was interacting with someone else who was going through their own frustrations. And it's funny because oftentimes as let's say we do this, we do intuitive readings for a living, or we're really big on coaching other people, or let's say we've been there, done that. And then all of a sudden it shows up for us again and we're like, oh my goodness, for me, that showed up for me this week. And I was thinking to myself, I am doing the exact thing that I suggest others don't do. And when I became aware of that, I thought it was really funny because I had been feeling fear and anxiety, not fear, anger and anxiety throughout the day. And I hadn't noticed it. I hadn't picked up on it. And all of a sudden it came to a culmination. It came to a point where I just felt angry. And so it was almost what I want to call a snowball effect. So I had listened to somebody voice their frustration over their working conditions. I was frustrated when I went to the grocery store. And that carried over into going to the grocery store and paying double for my groceries. Anybody experienced that lately? I think I jokingly said to the checker, maybe I should have just gone out to eat. And so we were joking about how expensive groceries had gotten. And then there was a woman who expressed her frustration that the buses at school had been canceled. So parents were really struggling with how are they going to get their kids to school. There's some parents who are, they work. Most parents have a job, right? So how are you going to go to work and now the bus is canceled and, you've got 4 kids who go to 4 different schools, right? So there's a lot of little things that are starting to really add up in people's lives. And for me, as an empath, right, a lot of us, and I've done videos where I've been like, look, we're all empaths, we all feel certain things. Well, not everyone, I guess, but a lot of us do. And so recognize what's not ours. Well, I was taking on that energy. And I was feeling for these people, and I was feeling my own frustration. And then I was matching those frequencies throughout the day. And then I kept getting kind of grumpier and grumpier. And I came home and everything just kind of culminated where I was feeling super grumpy. And I realized that I actually, because of that, was feeling frustration and anger that were associated with certain things from my past that I hadn't processed. So being angry, recognizing I was angry, and really kind of exploring that for a minute and diving into it, doing that shadow work, which some people call it, brought up things that I was still angry about in, let's say, relationships with parents or relationships with my spouse, my relationship with my spouse, which in actuality deeply reflected frustrations I was processing in relationship to myself and responses to these situations. Do you see where I'm going with this? So that gave me the opportunity to explore all of that. And I realized for a moment that I was actually afraid to allow all of those feelings to fully come up. And therefore, I had actually been I could use the word bypassing, but I would say it would be more ignoring. Bypassing is more when I say, I'm not angry. La-di-da-di-da, life is, sunshine and rainbows. So rather than I was feeling it, but then I realized, oh, there's more. But wait, there's more. And how much of this do I really want to feel? And I realized there was part of me that was still blocking the fullness of my experience, which is what I talk about all the time. And then I had judgment come up around that, like, wow, Carrie, do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. So I started to bring that all up and allow myself to fully feel the anger that I had and the empathy that I had for other people who were going through similar experiences or who I felt had been, our old system that we're still having to operate in is still obviously not in alignment with the new. And so I had anger around that. I think a lot of us are experiencing that right now. So we're feeling the collective anger, but at a deeper level, that's actually giving us an opportunity to recognize where that's really coming from. Like, how deep does that go? And oftentimes it's matched. We're able to feel it because there's anger inside of us that hasn't been processed. So when we see that reflection, we can ask ourselves, what else are we angry about? Where else is this coming from? That now I'm matching that frequency. Now I want to take it to a little bit of us versus them, 3D versus 4D versus 5D, or this side versus that side. I recognized that I could also allow that anger is an entity. It's a frequency that takes on energy, if we want to call it that, and other angry entities might show up and hang out in our field. And then they end up increasing, if we want to call it that anger, because we're matching it, we're feeding it, and they feed off of that. And I just wanted to give that presentation because I know from a higher perspective, that entity is us. We are energy. We are the energy that moves through all things. We are connected to all things. So theoretically, there is no separation. That is something that I'm seeing that I can dissolve and integrate and love, etc., etc. But at the time, I felt that I had actually picked up, right, those entities of anger from the grocery store, from the store that I did some shopping in, from a conversation with someone. And I realized how easy that can happen. And I'm not one to usually come on here and talk about these things because I like to see things from a really big, higher perspective. But from a higher perspective, that still happens to some of us. So it's important to address. So what I did was I felt that within myself. I realized there were certain feelings I still hadn't integrated. And as soon as I gave that opportunity for it to come up, I had a little bit of inner recognition of past circumstances that were here now because I was feeling them now. So it's this, I'm getting into, there's a bigger message here. So because I'm feeling that now from my past, I can actually heal that from my past. And I can also integrate some of those floating around anger entities that I allowed to come into my field because I matched or mirrored that energy. And so, in essence, I was healing a portion of my past. I was healing this frequency and energy that was around my field. And I just gave it all love. I held compassion for myself. I gave myself the opportunity to cry a little bit. I forgave myself for having never really processed this. I recognized that I was fearful of processing it because I didn't know how big it was going to get. And it was like, whoa, what? And then as I did that, I literally saw energy that had been feeding off of me, or I had been feeding it, or however you want to look at it, leave, dissolve, integrate. And so this message is multidimensional, right? So depending on what dimension we're kind of operating from, whether it's us versus them, entities and attachments, whether it's emotions, past, present, future, or whether it's from a higher perspective of that unification of none of that is anything outside of myself, and we are all processing and integrating depending on the level that we allow, right, us to do that at, to come back into unification and wholeness with all aspects of us. All shadow is, being integrated with the light. It gave me an opportunity to see all of those from multiple perspectives. And now I'm sharing that with you guys. So there's a lot of people that are going through this. And so, being patient with each other. I need to go back, and I want to go back, and I was able to see that maybe I could have handled the situation slightly different. Rather than agreeing with this person who was going through something, I could have just held space, acknowledged that they were going through something and it didn't belong to me. Ask myself, does this bring up anger inside of me? Oh, I do think I feel anger there. And then dove in a little bit from that point and said, okay, how do I bring this up? What is this attached to? What memories is this attached to? And I could have processed it without necessarily attaching myself to that other person's anger, feeling all of their stuff and taking it on as my own, or empathizing with it to the extent of making it mine, right? Does that make sense? So I'm just kind of trying to share this from multiple perspectives. If I would have operated from that way, I probably wouldn't have attached to those entity energies that were hanging out in my field. But because I did go through that process, I'm also able to recognize it and share it in this particular presentation for somebody else who might be going through these layers themselves. So we're all going through things on our own, and we can help each other through these experiences to integrate these experiences also. And it's going to look different for everyone. So that was my little nutshell aha that I had in the last few days. Simultaneously, there's amazing things happening. I'm feeling this extreme awareness of extreme awareness. I'm remembering when, right? And that's assisting and allowing me to also project a feeling into the future of a lightness of being. I can laugh at myself over having that moment. Whereas years ago, I would have really judged myself. I wouldn't have, so on and so forth. So these are all ahas. And simultaneously, I'm witnessing all of this, right? From a broader perspective. It's wild, you guys. And this stuff that we're experiencing is wild, and it's fun. And not necessarily seeming fun at the moment. Okay, so that was part 1, 2, and 3, I guess, depending on the dimensions that we're. All right. Should I go into a little flow? Let's go into a little flow. Okay. Let me pause. Oh. So the reason I want to share it from this way also is I was kind of shown that I was asked a question. Okay, and the question was, how much of our past do we need to focus on the lessons that we've learned? Should we let that all go and then just focus on the future? Or how much of it do we apply to our future moving forward? It was a beautiful question. And I didn't realize at the time how multidimensional that question really was. Because from a higher perspective, my guides are basically saying, which from a higher perspective, my guides are me in the future. So there is no separation. But because it's easy sometimes to see that as separate, sometimes it's easier to say my guides or higher self or whatever it might be. But from a higher perspective, we don't need any of it because everything is now. So theoretically, we are holding the knowingness within us because of the experience that we've had in the past. So we can move into the future without having to continually go back and pull in those recreations, recreate. Basically, we're in a whole new world from a very multidimensional perspective or nonlinear way. However, those experiences have added to our package, if you will. And until we recognize what we really have available to us, which isn't attached to that, everything's connected. Meaning we're brand new. So theoretically, this new package already holds all of that. So we can dissolve whatever all those stories are that are attached to this new package and then project from there because it's holding everything in the field, if that makes sense. So it's complicated because we're still patterning how we project ourselves into the future politically, socially, economically, so on, based on past patterning, because we aren't in a space yet of recognizing that we have more available to us now, that we don't have to hang on to that past patterning, right? So this is kind of a sticky place to be for some of us. And I'm hearing it's creating a time lag. So we think we should be here, but we're still hanging on to this other stuff because we're not quite sure how to create without all of that, because that's what we're used to doing. So what I'm being shown is if we can begin to recognize what's available to us, and in this particular reading I did for this fellow human, I had seen natural resources that we have yet to talk about. Natural resources that are underneath our feet. But also that's a play on words. Natural resources that are in our feet. So our own body is reconstructing itself in such a way that we are able to modify how it is that we interpret our environment and how it is that we then feed back into the system. Therefore, we're creating a whole new system. And many of us are not acknowledging because we're not able to differentiate between what we were like and what we are now. Once we can recognize, wow, this is a whole new package that has everything inside of it ready to go. We don't have to project, okay, I did this, so I can't do that this time. So I need to do this time, and we did this previously, so now we need to change it this way. It becomes more seamless. It becomes an interaction with our future selves that are happening now that already has absorbed the past. And what happens is we're creating from a space of new alignments. So if we are aligning with our full brain capacity and not just a small percentage, this is now project that out into the future with our reality. What if we align with more of a oneness and unification in our political, social, scientific? So there needs to be less of a separation occurring. And when we can start to see that really we don't have, and we're at a fork in a road, because some of us are choosing that reality. Other people are choosing the separation because they can't or don't want to or choose not to bring themselves into this new cohesion. So they're looking outside of themselves and they are forking off into the direction of artificiality, artificial reality of needing that in order to grow. But in the reality that I'm part of, that I'm witnessing, that I am choosing to say yes to, we can use that. But what about our own intelligence, our own innate intelligence, our inner intelligence that is our primary resource? That's where I'm choosing to move from and to co-create with, if that makes sense. And I know this is a kind of a multidimensional way of looking at things. For some people, they won't be able to see that. They will not be able to wrap their brains around it. And so they're choosing a different reality. And from my perspective, that reality becomes less, we don't see it as much. It's not going to be part of our reality in the same way that we think it is moving forward, if that makes sense. We're still going to see lag time. We're still going to see certain aspects of reality playing out. But for whatever reason, from my perspective of what the guides are showing, it won't impact us. It won't have the same impact that we assume that it will. And we can't see that yet because we are not aware of all of the resources that we have available to us that are going to then shift our future so drastically, we can't compare. It's apples and bananas. So, you guys following what I'm putting down? So get out of our heads about it. Let go of our expectations on what it's going to look like, even the political outcome. Not to say that we don't make a choice. We can make a choice. We have human choices that are being made constantly. But recognize that some of the choices we're making now are based on lack of information. So we have to go back to our inner resources and feel into our own innate center, heart center, and then make choices based on that. And that information then becomes known. We begin to see things differently, which opens up our senses. So it's like somebody being able to see a spaceship and somebody else not seeing it, or somebody else being able to see a potential outcome strategically, whereas somebody else doesn't have a clue, because they are aware and they're looking at that from that perspective. So each of us is holding a unique and individual perspective of what our future is going to look like. And if we can hold it in a space of centered awareness and heart coherence, it allows us to project into that future and utilize everything we have at our disposal. Whereas if we take the past and have to try to coordinate it to add up to the future through using our, I'm hearing scarcity. We only think we have this, so we have to do this. Well, this happened 20 years ago, and that's going to happen now. That's not necessarily true. So it's constantly reorganizing, constantly reassessing, and things are going to change much faster than we have the capability currently of understanding if we're not utilizing all of our resources to bring us into a higher understanding of what our capabilities are. It's play on words, I know. It's a conundrum. So we're being called just to kind of recognize that and be okay with not fully knowing what the future holds, because we're creating it in a much faster time, right? Okay, so that's the message. Do I want to go into flow about that? Maybe I'll go into a little bit of flow. I think that was kind of an in and out flow. And as we, okay, so I'll flow a little bit. As we host this new reality, as we become the host of all hosts, as we turn into our deeper alchemy of heart-centered awareness, we begin to reorganize our senses in such a way that we begin to sense what's really at play. We begin to sense through all of our senses, and we begin to sift through the senseless. We begin to move that off to the side so it can be absorbed and decided upon by those who are choosing to stare at that reality. And that is their choice. At this stage of our awareness, we are being invited to continually open in a very childlike, curious, imaginative way. And the more we can do this, the more we begin to realize, the more we begin to open our eyes, the more we begin to see that is available to us now, in this reality now, and we begin to see that it is. For in some cases, people are unable to see because they refuse to look. They are unable to see because they are refusing to look within. They are unable to see, for they only see that which they have been looking from. They only see that which they have been, and this creates a sense of confusion, or a loop, if you will, in which they create continuously from that loop. And many are breaking free of this cyclical pattern reorganization that was built by an organization that understood the principles of reality. Yet those principles have changed, and the way in which we are exchanging information has sped up. Therefore, the rate of control is lacking, meaning the new organization is constantly reassessing itself. We are all creating a new divinity loop, if you will. And so the old organizations are confused as well, for they do not understand how to cross-reference. They do not understand how to merge or create in this new way. And so they are choosing to play in what they know. So those of us who are going quantum, if you will, those of us who know more or see more, are starting to bend the rules. We are starting to create our own rules, and these new rules have already been created, if you will. But we are beginning to come into our own level of awareness that enhances the drawing board, if you will, and it allows us to draw more fluidly, to draw with I'm hearing like within our own fluids, like our body fluids, our brain. And I'm going to do a video on that in the future, because I did a channeling this morning in walking meditation where my guides were like, look and you will see. So look inside the body, start to focus on the back of the brain, start to focus on the inner eyes, start to listen into the ears, start to pay attention to the senses that are pressing out from us, that are wanting to send out these little feelers, if you will. So signals. And okay, so got a little. So as we do this, we reorganize, and again, the drawing board, we create a sketchbook, if you will, and we are able to sketch in real time what it is that we are then imprinting into the reality of the now. And we are fluidly acquiring these new modalities and realities and capabilities. And I'm just seeing natural resources. So, all right, I'm going to end on that note and just kind of tie that all up together for the end of the week review. And I hope that was helpful for someone. I know I speak in code, but there is an energy behind what it is that I'm sharing. So hopefully that was felt. And in the meantime, in love and light, guys, namaste, and to be continued.